Hello, I'm retired Battalion Chief Larry Cockman from the Greensboro, North Carolina Fire Department History Book Committee. We're here today at the Greensboro Historical Museum. I'm standing in front of the General Green, the first steam pumper, or as they called it back then, the steamer. Today, December 9th, 2019, we are starting a new tradition of recording and preserving the heritage and culture of our retirees. Our retirees have contributed so much to the success of our great fire department. Their stories retire with them and are sometimes gone forever when they pass away. They will share their emergency calls that will always be a part of their memories forever. So sit back and listen as they carry us through their journey in the Greensboro Fire Department.
Okay, my name is Larry Winford Coble, and my age is 68, and I retired in 2007. I had 35 full, and I had a year and a half sick leave, so I ended up with 36 and a half years. I was a battalion chief when I retired. No, I live in a little small town called Liberty, North Carolina, about 21 miles south of Greensboro. My uncle, Harold Coble, was in the first class of black firefighters. Before I joined the fire department, I was in the United States Army. And I got out of the Army in January of 1972. When I got out of the Army in 1972, I realized that I was going to need a job, and I had a family to feed, and so I called my uncle and asked him to send me an application for the Greensboro Police Department. And about a week later, I got an application, and it said Greensboro Fire Department. So I called my uncle back, and I said, I asked you for an application for the police department, and he said, you don't need to go with the police department, you need to go with the fire department. So I filled out the application and sent it back. I got out of the Army on a Friday, and he had me an interview with Chief Powell on Monday morning. Wow. So that's how I ended up. Okay. The process back then was I met with Chief Powell, and he interviewed me and went over my application. And about a week later, he sent me to the training division, and I did a physical agility test. And they took my height and weight and ran me through some drills and things like that. And I left, and then about 2 weeks later, he called me back, and he said I had the job. My starting salary was $553 a month. Well, the first day I was hired, along with Carl Eller. He and I started the first day. Some of the other members were Danny Shoemake, Charlie Jones, Jerry Price, Arlie Reese, Rick Travers, Warren Ritter, Steve Fowler. Those were some of the guys that I went through training with. As a matter of fact, 7 of the guys in my class were promoted to chief officer. We had a lot of good times. Chief Osborne was our training chief, and he was a no-nonsense type of guy. He didn't tolerate any horseplay. I remember when we were on the drill grounds, and a fire truck would go by, and if anybody turned and looked, you had to run laps. Chief Kent kind of, played a few games with us and stuff like that. But when Chief Osborne was around, it was all business. It was no games. I guess my first call kind of made up my mind that I was doing the right thing. It was really exciting. I hadn't been through training yet on my first fire, but going in with the particular guy I was with and following him around, I was like scared to death, but it was so exciting, and I just knew that the way we worked as a team and the way things came together, it was something that I wanted to do. I just came out of the Army, so I was used to working in a team concept with, a structure with the way things are done. So it fit right in for what I wanted to do. Yes, my first station assignment was Station 1, and I was assigned to Engine 2. My captain was E.E. Ritter, And he was an old school captain, probably been captain longer than I'd been alive when I came on. And he was a man of few words, but when he spoke, you'd better listen because he had something to say. My first driver was Jay Lewis, and he spent his entire career on Engine 2. He was the first guy that I met when I reported to Station 1, and Captain Ritter assigned him to show me how to put my boots in my quick hitch, and started working with us how to put on air packs and how to do the basic things. And Lynn McLaughlin was on the back of the truck. Big guy, 200-something pounds, about 6'3", huge guy. And Mike Long was on the back of the truck. Well, I don't know if you would call it pranks or funny moments, but there's something that stuck in my mind when I was first on Engine 2 in my first call. I was excited to get the first call, and back then, in those days, we rode the tailboard of the truck, and we got a call and got on the truck, and all 4 trucks were going down Green Street. And as the truck pulled out of the station, Lynn McLaughlin kind of stepped in behind me between him and the truck and put his hands on each side of mine. And here we are going down Green Street, and it was just great. Sirens blowing and people looking at us. And I kind of felt kind of like a kid because Lynn had his hands, around me and between he and the truck. And I didn't kind of like that too much. And it was a false alarm, and we came on back, and Jay backed the truck into the bay, and we got off. And Lynn looked at me and said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I really, really enjoyed that." I said, "But Lynn, you don't have to put your hands around me while we're responding on call." And he said, "Let me tell you something, son." He said, "I went through training with your uncle, and he asked me to look after you until you get through training." And he said, "That's the way it's going to be." So that was the end of that conversation. And I'd always thought about that, and I stayed there for 10 months, and then I came back, and I was reassigned to Engine 2. And on our first call, Lynn just kind of looked over at me and winked, and he said, "You're on your own, bud." And that was a great feeling. The union was active, and I was a member, but they didn't have a lot of bargaining power back then. Not very many members were members. So it was shortly thereafter I got promoted, and back then they didn't like officers to be in the union. So I just bowed out and never became a member again. We cooked together 2 meals a day, and we did breakfast on Sundays. And I understand that that's something that they're getting away from now, and I think that's something that they need to continue as much as possible, because that's a lot of time that we had to bond together and talk about, family and friends and the calls that we'd gone on. And I think that's something that, the guys need to work it back into their routine when they can. Yes, I had a favorite dish. I used to do lasagna back then. There was a guy named Donnie Barnett that was one of his specialties, and he taught me how to make lasagna, so that was one of the things that I did quite often. I think we put in $5 a day, and that took care of 2 meals. Dorms versus cubicles, I think it's really good that the guys have their own privacy, because when we slept in the dorms, some guys would want to go to sleep, and some guys wanted to study, and then there would be the TV on and stuff like that. But the upside to the dorms is you share so much quality time together. You get to talk and, do things like that. Whereas I understand now that most of the guys, they go to their rooms after meals in the afternoons and the evenings, and you don't have to share that quality time together. So there's an upside and a downside. And, when we came along, you only got your own quarters when you made captain. And I think that was another, striving point to want to make officers, to be able to do that. And now everybody comes on with that, those private quarters. So There's ups and there's downs. I guess all fire stations are pretty much the same, but I think things have changed quite a bit as far as doing things together off duty. I know when we came on together, a lot of times we would spend a lot of time off duty playing golf. I know guys were building beach houses down at Long Beach, and we would all get together and go down and stay a week with them and have to dry their houses in. If a guy needed a roof, we'd all get together and go over and tear the roof off and put it back. So we spent a lot of time helping each other. And from what I understand today, there's not a lot of that going on. Pretty much the guys, you know, work together, and then when they leave, they don't, get together that often. We also, if a guy got sick or a family member was sick, we'd always go visit each other. Sometimes I would get to the hospital before the wives of husbands that were injured and stuff like that, because I felt like that was a part of the responsibility. And I'm not sure that's prevalent today like it was when we came on. When a retired firefighter visits a fire station, I think it's very important that they, take time out and welcome them in, make a pot of coffee, and sit down and talk and learn what we went through and some of our experiences. Because I think that's why a lot of firefighters that are retired don't go by the fire stations, because, they act like you're strangers. Can I help you? They don't ask, if you were a member or invite you in for a cup of coffee. So that's why we don't go by that much, because we don't really know anybody and you don't feel welcome. So you just tend to stay away. And I think it's very important if they want to learn about what we went through and where we helped bring them today, is very beneficial for them to sit down and, chat with us. I remember my first call was a false alarm. And my first fire was over on Phillips Avenue. I had only been on the truck about a month, and it was a working fire, and Captain Ritter told me to stay with Lynn McLaughlin. And when I went in, he couldn't see anything, and I didn't know anything what I was doing, so I just followed him around and helped him drag the hose, and we were able to knock down the fire pretty quick, and it felt really great. But like I say, it was my first fire. I hadn't been through training yet. I just knew just basic things. So, but I knew then this is what I wanted to do. Never was a driver. About the time that it was due for me to make driver, I became a squadman, and I spent 7.5 years on the squad. So, yes, the first call that I ever drove, Captain Ritter was real strict about driving the fire truck. He would not let you get up in that front seat until you first knew how to operate the pump and learn your territory. And finally I convinced him that I could do both. So one day he let me drive the truck back. And just so happened we got a car fire on our way back. And I was just as nervous as I could be, because on old engine 2, there were several steps you had to go through to get your pump engaged. But I was finally able to do all of the things right, get water on the truck, and it was a real good feeling. And then after that, he would let me drive back from the training division and stuff like that. So that was my first pumping experience. When I first came on the department, we were answering very few medical calls. And then the trend in the late 80s, we were deciding to go to the squad concept. So on my own, I went and got my emergency medical technician out at GTCC on my own at night. And I applied for one of the first jobs on the squad, and I was assigned to Squad 1, over at Station 5. And my first medical call was with Danny Shoemate, and it was a call off Friendly Avenue somewhere, and it was a man unconscious in a car. And we arrived, and it was raining real hard, and the window was partially down on the driver's side. So the first thing I did was reached in to check the guy's pulse, And it shocked me because the guy was real hard. Rick Borders had already set in. He had been there for some time. And I was surprised by him being so hard. I jerked my hand back out of the windshield. And the first thing I did was to look around to see if anybody was looking, because we were so green that I was kind of embarrassed. And Shoemaker and I laughed about that later, you know, because of being so green and it being our first call. I guess a couple of calls that stand out. First was the Greensboro Daily News fire that I was responding to. As a matter of fact, we had a Greensboro Daily News reporter riding with us that day at Station 5. And we had gone all day long without a call. And about 5 o'clock, that alarm came in. And Danny Shoemate and I were riding Squad 1, and she was riding with us. And when we arrived, there was just heavy smoke showing, you know, throughout the whole structure. And Danny and I and Joy McIntyre took the first line in. And it was ink everywhere, and there was a printing press that was up on the first floor, but that printing press would go up and down, but it was up on the first floor, and there were metal flat slabs all the way around the printing press. And unbeknownst to us, when we took a first line in, we were on a ledge about 3 foot wide. And we went in as far as we could go, and we needed more hose, so Joey said he would go back out and pull us more slack. And when he stepped aside to go pull more slack, he fell into the basement about 7 or 8 foot. Fire was all in the basement area, so we put the line down on him, and we called back that we needed, you know, a roof ladder to get him out. And finally somebody came in and bought a ladder, and we were able to get him out. And I think we had about 4 different firefighters that were injured on that call that day, and it was, you know, pretty intense. Not usually that we have that many firefighters injured on a particular fire. The other fire that I remember was I had been battalion chief about 6 months, and we had a railroad warehouse downtown on fire. It was about a football and a half length long, and when we got there, one end of it was completely involved in fire. And I remember I was there shortly after the first arriving crews, and we set up aero trucks on both sides, had engines on both sides, and pulled hand lines. And I remember telling the guys that I wanted them to set up about 50 feet back because the fire was progressing really, really fast. And as soon as the guys got all the trucks in place and the lines, we were able to knock that fire down pretty quick. And I remember Chief Flowers was my commander, and he came in at the command post, and I went over my command sheet with him, and he looked down and he says, "Looks like you got everything pretty much under control," and left me in command. And that was a fire that, you know, I was really proud of, that went really well. All the tactics came together like it should. And for him not to assume command of that large fire meant a great deal to me at that particular time. 9/11 affected me quite a bit. I remember I was at the corner of Holden and Spring Garden, and I was on the way to Chief Spears' office. And somebody called me on my cell phone and said that a plane had just hit the tower. So I went on and proceeded to go to his office. And about the time that I walked into his office, he had the TV on, and we were talking about, you know, that it was just an accident. Plane just ran into the tower. And a couple of minutes later, the second plane hit the other tower. I told Chief Spears, I said, "There's no way this is an accident. This has got to be terrorism." And he said, "I agree." And we had companies training and out in the field doing different tasks. So I told him, I said, "Don't you think we ought to put all the companies back in the station?" He said, "Yeah, we need to do that." So we did that, and I went back to my station and kind of just, you know, in awe looked at it most of the day and realized that, you know, we would have done the same thing. We had no idea that that building would have collapsed as soon as it did. And it just went over in my mind that, you know, we could have done the same thing if we would have put those firefighters in harm's way, not knowing that building was going to come down like that. I had a lot of mentors in the department, but I'll name 3 or 4. Chief Kent was my training chief, and for some reason he took an interest in me after I got out on the line. He sent me to several different schools. He assigned me to training division to do interviews. He put me out on special assignment to do some investigations on some personnel issues from time to time. And just, started to help me build my resume. And once I was promoted to captain, I had the pleasure of working with A.B. Kimball and Jim Parker. And they too took an interest in me and put me in the car with them and let me ride with them and started teaching me the ropes. And then when they went on vacation, they would assign me in the car, which enabled me to get a great deal of experience and put me ahead of the game. So those 3 guys, in addition to Jack Coble, who helped me reach a lot of my goals, helped me a lot in gaining a lot of experience over the years. I had a lot of challenges, but I guess the main thing was the group of guys that I came on with, that I competed with. It was a challenge just to make sure that I was in the mix. I always felt like that I put myself up against, anybody. I had a lot of confidence in myself. I worked hard, and it was just a pleasure to compete with them. And we were all, supportive of one another. If I wasn't lucky enough to make it that particular time, we congratulated the other guy, and then sooner or later, I would, get the nod, and they would congratulate me. And so those were some of the things that I was really proud of. My most heartbreaking moment was when I was transferred to training. There was a chief named Larry Cochran who had just got promoted to assistant chief over training. And the rumor was that Chief Cochran had unpacked his bags. And I said to myself, I sure hope he stays. Because at the time, I was really wanting to make assistant chief, but I wanted to be a battalion commander. And I did not want to go to training. So I was on the drill ground one day, and I had a call to come to Chief Jones's office. And I'll never forget that day. I walked in, and he informed me that Chief Cochran was leaving training, and he was offering me the job. And my heart almost fell out. I was very happy doing what I wanted to do, and my goal was to become a battalion commander and stay in suppression. I just had no desire to go back to training. I'd already been there once. And he said, well, I know you want to make assistant chief, and I'm offering you this job, and if you don't take it, I'm going to open it up. And we all know in the fire service, when you're offered something and you don't take it, there's a consequence to pay. So I told him I'd think about it, and I'd get back with him in 24 hours, and he said fine, and I did. And it was one of the hardest decisions that I ever had to make, and but I guess I made the right one, because I went on and accepted the job. And I told him, I said, I'll take it, but if I don't like it, I'd like to move out in a year. And he said, well, I moved Cochran, I'll move you. So I said, okay, I'll take the job. But that was probably my most disappointing moment. I guess the proudest moment was when I made battalion chief. Chief Powell called me in one day and promoted me to chief, and he gave me his little spiel, and I'll never forget it. I told him when he gave me the badge, I said, I'll give it 100% every day. And he looked at me and he said, Chief Coble, sometimes 100% is not enough. And I didn't really get to a reply because somebody knocked on the door about that time and said President Reagan had just been shot. So he shook my hand and he said, congratulations, Chief Coble, and he left the room. Dealing with fire death is not something easy. We didn't have any training to deal with that, so we pretty much just talked among ourselves. We even kind of made jokes about it to kind of, ease the pressure. And later on in our careers, we started getting a little counseling and how to deal with it. But mostly we just deal with it among ourselves by talking to each other and kind of joking about it and to kind of, get through it. I only had to cope with members of the department's death about 2 or 3 times in my career. The first one was a guy that I was assigned with, Lynn McLaughlin, on my first company assignment. And Lynn was kind of one of my mentors. I spoke about that in the interview. And Lynn was a mountain of a man and in great health. And he got sick and he went in the hospital and he never came out. And it took me a long, long time to get over that because he was one of my first guys that I'd met and had helped me a great deal. And it took me a long time to get over that. And we had 2 suicides in the department while I was on, and they were both on the same company. And one of them was on my company when I first made captain. And I had just talked to him a couple of weeks before he had committed suicide. And it took me a long, long time to get over that. But here again, we didn't have any mechanism to deal with it. We just kind of talked among each other to kind of get through it. But those are the 3 that kind of affected me throughout my career. I worked with some of the females initially when they came on our department, and I didn't really have any issues with females as long as they came in and did their jobs, and for the most part they did. Guys were kind of a little upset when they first hired them. They told us that they were going to sleep in the bays with everybody else, and by the time they finished training, it had changed, and then they took the captain's room and put the captain in with the battalion chief and gave them their own bedrooms, which was, really not fair because we thought, that everybody should, earn their way to that particular area. So that was kind of a little sore spot with the guys, but, later on we accepted that. They came in, they did a great job for the most part. And I supervised several women firefighters throughout my career as chief officer, and I had very few problems. I tried to treat them the way I wanted to be treated. I knew how it was for the first class of black firefighters in 1962 to break into the fire service. So I had a little background of how they felt about, breaking into the fire service as a female. So I had a lot of compassion for them. And I tried to do my best to make sure that they succeeded, just like a lot of my mentors did to break into the fire service for the first time also. I would do it all over again, no questions. I had a great career. I met some friends and built some bonds that would last a lifetime. As far as any regrets, I have very few. My goal was to become the operations chief, and I didn't reach that goal, and I guess it was my fault. Chief Teeter said at my retirement party I was one of the few people that had turned assistant chief back twice, and I had my reasons for doing that, and I guess now that I look back, if I had not done that, then I would have achieved my goal as operations chief, and I had a lot of ideas about how I wanted to impact the suppression division. But all in all, I feel like I had a great impact. I was a chief officer for over 25 years. I was in training twice. So I had a big impact on the suppression division, but sometimes I wonder if I would have gone and stayed on the track, that I might have had even more impact on the division throughout the whole entire city. Well, the roles of firefighters have changed tremendously. When we came on in 1972, we very seldom left the fire station unless it was called. And then in the early 80s, everything started to change. The public demanded more out of our firefighters. They wanted to see us out in the public more. So we started getting involved in all types of programs out in the community. And then it wasn't long that we started into the medical calls. And then after that, we started doing high-level rescue, the swift water rescue, the hazmat teams. And all these things have evolved into specialization. And we found out that, you know, everybody can't be trained in all of those specialties. You have to break it up into groups and train individuals to be able to deal with each facet of those specializations. So things have changed tremendously. They're continuing to change. The other thing that have changed is a lot of tradition has gone out of being in the fire service. When I came on, we worked for a lot of old school captains that did things a certain way. You didn't question whatever they said. You were seen and told what to do, and that's what you did. The new generation questions things. They see ways of doing things better, and they want to have input, and that role has changed. More newer company officers that were tolerant of that. Back in our day, that wasn't accepted. So there's good changes and there's bad changes. I would love to see some of the old traditions remain because I think there's a benefit by learning one job very good before you move to the next one. Because that way, when you're promoted into a new position, you're ready to hit the ground running. Sometimes I think guys move a little too fast and then they have to train into the job instead of being ready to perform right away. I was in the United States Army for 3 years, and I served most of my time in Fort Hood, Texas. Like I said earlier, being in the service, I was already a team-oriented type person, and I understand the rank structure in the military, and we also had a rank structure in the department, and a part of being in the service was being able to take orders. And like I said, when I entered the fire service, that was a big part of it, taking orders, and I fit right into that scheme of things. Faith has always been a big part of my life. My father taught us to put God, family, and job first. And I always did that. He always taught us to do whatever we say we're going to do. Always treat people like you want to be treated. And I used that throughout my career, and it always served me well.
3 minutes, Chief.
My health's been fairly good. I don't feel like I did when I was 50, but basically I'm in pretty good shape. My advice to rookies today would be to don't get in a big hurry to move up. Learn one job and learn it well and then move to the next. And be willing to listen to your senior firefighters. You can't learn everything out of a book. You got to be able to take their experiences and build yours. And if I had any advice to them, it would be to that. And I would also say, be willing to accept some of the old school things that we went through. I mean, when I came on, you did all the dirty jobs, you got all the errands until you got somebody to replace you. I think that was good because it was a step that you feel like one day I'm going to be able to have somebody behind me. And just, keep some of the old tradition in and be willing to accept that. And I think it makes you a bigger part of the brotherhood, that you went through some of the same things that the guys that came before you did. And I think it'll make you a stronger firefighter. I guess the thing I would want them to remember about me is that I was a firefighter that really tried to look after other firefighters. That I always wanted to be fair. I always wanted to mentor people because I had a lot of good mentors. And I wanted to make them prepared to move up when I moved on, to be ready to assume those positions. And that's what I always tried to do, is be fair, treat people like I wanted to be treated, to give them the opportunity to show their potential, because I had those opportunities also. I guess I want my family to remember that the fire department changed my life. I was fortunate enough to have a job that I really loved. That I came to work every day and served with a group of guys that I won't ever forget. And I'm sorry, I was just very fortunate to be a part of this organization. The last thing that I would like to mention is two groups of people. And the first group was the first black class in 1962. And not only because my uncle was in that class, but because of the character of those guys. And what they endured enabled me to achieve what I achieved. And I hope and pray that each and every one of them are proud of the way I carried myself for 25 years. And the last group that I want to mention is my training class. I served with the best group of guys that I could ever imagine. And 7 of us went on to become chief officers. And to sit around that table and help plan the future of this organization meant a great deal to me. And I'll be always grateful and proud to serve with those guys. And I feel like that we left it better than we found it. And I appreciate that.
We hope you enjoyed watching these documentaries. It was our goal to share and preserve the memories of our retired Greensboro firefighters. It is our desire that these documentaries will inspire future generations to continue the brotherhood, sisterhood, and camaraderie while always striving for excellence in their careers. While fire apparatus, equipment, and technology have improved, several things will always remain the same. The courage and bravery it takes to mitigate natural and man-made disasters will always be a part of the job. Although our retirees are no longer a physical part of the GFD world, a giant piece of each retiree's memories have been shared with you today. These memories will be in their hearts and minds forever. A special thank you goes out to Captain Harold Haney for his many long hours of recording and editing. Thank you, Harold. A job well done.